Welcome to Running in the 70s, where we interview, meet, and get to know athletes of all kind who were running in the 70s. I'm your host, Matthew Kleinowski. We're back for part two with the amazing Roger Robinson. If you haven't listened to part one, be sure to go back and listen to that episode too. Enjoy. Today on the podcast, we are down under in New Zealand talking with someone who's been running for over 60 years. By his estimates, over 1,000 races, great successes, wins from corners of the world, from Fiji to Canada, across Europe and down under, and some spectacular pauses in his career that he's had to face challenges. And he married well. Let's today get to know and meet Roger Robinson. Visit two other things you've done: writing about running and you're announcing. What's your story of becoming a race announcer?
It happened almost by accident. No, I got into it because I was in Christchurch, New Zealand in early 70s, and Christchurch got the 1974 Commonwealth Games,
Right.
which in countries like New Zealand is a very important event because that's one where we can win medals, largely because America was foolish enough to leave the British Commonwealth. So, and Britain never got Ethiopia, so New Zealand can win some medals. That was going to be very big in Christchurch. I went through a bad time, as I told you, with running, and got ill health, and I got a kind of that kind of bad, persistent flu that people can get in their 20s, and I was weak. So at one track meet, the announcer had to leave early, and he asked me if I would take over. This is just a regular kind of weekly track meet. And I took over and did the announcing for him that day. Then from that, they asked me if I would apply for the position of one of the track announcers for the Commonwealth Games. And I was appointed to that. So in 74. And of course, I was a beginner, but I did a lot of preparation for it. It happened I had a academic leave in England for a while in 1973 and took myself to the British Championships at Crystal Palace. And this is one of my favorite stories. I went to the announcer's box and Peter Matthews was there and Stan Greenberg. Peter Matthews is one of the absolute great announcers. I introduced myself and said, I've got the job at the Commonwealth Games. Can I just sit behind you and watch? And they said, sure. So I did that for 2 days. One bonus of that was I got to see Dave Bedford break the world record for 10,000 meters that day. The other thing that I learned, and of course the crowd is focused, and Peter was giving splits and saying how close he was to the world record, ahead of world record share, and doing this fabulous job, focused on. That was all wonderful. Then at the end of the meet, we were just packing, everybody folding up their papers, and they'd had a successful day. The door opened, the door was flung open, and there stood, I better not name him, but Britain's top shot putter of that time, who was of course big by definition, and was quivering with rage. and he said, and you better get your bleep to go in on this. He said, every time I put out I wanted to do an effing shot, you put out an effing announcement.
Wow.
He said, and he then flung the door shut so hard that the announcer's box was about halfway up the stand at Crystal Palace, and I thought the whole box was going to slide down the step to the. And I sat there thinking, this job is a lot harder than it looks. What I learned very quickly is that being a track and field announcer, you're actually in charge of a 6-ring circus. And you can't ever say anything without looking to see what else is going on.
Right.
Because you can't talk about the start of the 100 meters as somebody is about to do their life-shaping high jump. It's not just a matter of getting the names right. You've got to be that attentive. And I'm doing it again. I keep trying to get out of it. I keep looking for people to knife me in the back and take over the job. But it's happening again next week at the New Zealand National Championship. And it'll be the same job. New Zealand has just come off a very successful World Indoor Championships. Most of those athletes are going to be there. And I'd better be careful not to say, now let's watch Hamish Kerr do his next high jump, and here's the world indoor champion. And then some shot putter is going to come and beat me up afterwards because I've
Right.
and so on. So it's a challenging job. I say you need to be like a Martian and have about 6 eyes on little stalks so that you can watch all the different events all the time. It's always a challenge. Obviously, it interests me because I'm always trying to do it well, and it's always impossible to do it well because it's so hard. The other thing about it is that the real job is not to tell people what has happened, but to tell people what is going to happen. Because they're there, they paid their admission. A lot of them have never been to a track meet before. They've come because they want to see Eliza McCartney do a nice smile. And it's your job to tell them, hey, now look, now Eliza McCartney is going to take her jump and she's got one more at this height and that kind of thing. And there's no point in saying, oh, wow, you just missed seeing the national record high jump. You've got to tell them beforehand. So
Right.
it's a very tough job and a very important one. And as I say, it's one of those jobs where I know you always remember the things where you messed up or missed rather than the successes. But that's been a challenge and an interest.
How often do athletes come up and say, thanks, you did a great job announcing my race? Does
No,
that ever happen?
I can't think of any case.
Yeah, okay.
Now come and tell you your mistakes. You call me Eliza and my name's Elizabeth, or something like that. My biggest mistake, and I'm probably due to be decapitated any formally executed any time, was when I mixed up the princes at the Commonwealth Games in 1990. And I said it was
boy.
Prince Andrew, and actually it was Prince Edward, or the other way around. I don't have a lot of interest in royalty, and I screwed up there. So probably I'm due for the royal execution by axe, I should think.
I am always impressed with the Diamond League or Olympic track announcers, how they do master almost all of the names that are from different languages and different cultures. For the upcoming New Zealand championships, how many new athletes will be there that you're not familiar with, haven't seen, haven't said their name many times? How much of that preparation is there for you?
That's part of the challenge, Matthew, is that in that business, your knowledge is by definition out of date every week.
Yeah.
So it's just changing all the time. And there are new ones coming through. It was better when I was doing it every week, whereas now I only do it for the big events. And I'm more in touch this time. I haven't watched the World Championships. There's a big track meet on in Hamilton on Sunday, which I will watch on stream. I won't be there, but I'll watch it on stream because that's, I need to do that to begin to get to know the athlete. We had an important meet in Wellington, so I saw a lot of them in action there. But no, it's really tough unless you're right involved. And that's one reason why it's time for me to get out, because spending half my time in America now, I can't be as constantly involved as I used to be.
How much stamina demand is there to go through a championship like that as
Oh,
an announcer?
this is going to be 4 days, and it's almost elder abuse to put me through it. That's that's why I describe it. I would say the 1990 Commonwealth Games in Auckland, when I was having to not only deal with all the complexities of track and field, but also television. We were having to coordinate with television, and they were wanting to impose their timing. I remember one particular incident when they wanted to start a race and they said, go. And I was in some way coordinating with the starter's marshal. And I said, no, we had a guy called Perlman, who was New Zealand in the pole vault. I said, Perlman's getting ready to vault. We can't go until he vaults. And they said, go. They said, go. And I said, no. We had this back and forth. And coordinating with the screen, the giant screen, and with television, I would say that was the most exhausting thing I've ever done in my whole life.
Wow.
That
You've been around.
That includes running the Boston Marathon into a headwind.
Yeah, let's make sure people know you've run Peachtree, you've run Twin Cities, you've run in Canada, you've run in the big races. All
Yes.
that everybody in the American audience knows. What's a litany of some of those great memories you have, or at places that you've traveled for those events?
Well, they're all
Maybe I
great.
caught.
I wrote my book, When Running Made History, started as a history of modern running. And then I refocused it because I found so many cases where the running event was of more significance than just within the sport, like the whole emergence of running as a mass movement in America. And socially, this is a huge thing. Put it this way, when historians come to write the history of the modern world, say of modern New York or modern Boston, it would be a complete distortion to write the history of those places without mentioning the marathon. See what I mean?
Right.
It's so important. They will have to mention the marathon. That was what I was trying to get in that book because it's something new. I was trying to get this occasions when running was much more than just running.
Right.
And but I still kept in it this history of the modern running movement. And then the other aspect I gave to that book finally, and people have really liked it, was that I focused entirely on events that I had witnessed. I'd been at personally. So it's eyewitness history, that book, and every one. So it's Peachtree and what that meant. And there's a celebration of July the 4th and the whole movement, or it was the Berlin Marathon in the year when the wall came down, or it was that day at the Rome Olympics. I have two chapters about it. One was watching a baby Bikila, and the other was the New Zealanders' Day. There's a chapter on Buddy Edlin, a figure who Americans too often forget, who absolutely major figure in American running history. And I saw him finish his world record marathon at the Polytechnic Stadium because he was in England and he ran all our local club races. And we called him our Yank.
Going through the book and the things that maybe you found as you were writing it, what were the milestones? Where were there sea changes? Obviously, we've got the Cascade runoff where money came in. We've got Catherine Switzer and the Boston Marathon.
Yeah.
There's the crazy events, which you're in some cases intimately familiar with. What were the milestones through this?
One that I did not witness, I didn't write about in that book, was the 1976 New York Marathon, the first one through the 5 boroughs, when it came out of Central Park in the American bicentennial year, and it was offered as a kind of celebration of the bicentennial. That was one. Another one that I think was absolutely crucial was New York Marathon in 1981.
Right.
For a whole number of reasons. And I wasn't there, but I was doing television commentary in New Zealand. I'd run the New York Marathon and won the Masters the year before in 1980 when I was on academic leave. In 1981, I couldn't go because I was working. I was marking exam scripts and running meetings and all that stuff. But that was the one where the key thing was it was the first that was on network television. It was on ABC television. And it was the double world record by Alberto Salazar and Alison Rowe.
Right.
And last chapter of my latest book is about Alison Rowe. It's a book called, my title for it is Running's Greatest Stories. And Alison was such a redefining figure in terms of the image of women and admiration for women, because she was this compelling figure and totally beautiful, but totally beautiful in motion and totally beautiful because of the power of that motion. And these are all new things to be saying about women. In that latest book, which is the final title was Running Throughout Time, I quote the episode where in Auckland, the week after Alison won New York, one of the Sunday papers, traditionally it's page 3, like some British papers, was of a topless bathing beauty, sitting either in a bikini or topless and being, of course, totally passive and static. And the editor of the paper, who was a woman, replaced that week with a picture of Alison Rowe winning the New York Marathon. And she called it a blow for feminism. And it was. And women's groups bought up copies of the paper to make sure that it was successful. I write about that, trying to show how important that race was in terms of redefining what women could do, how important that race was in terms of the internationalism of the sport and the public image. Suddenly, marathon running was in everybody's living room because of network television. And we were taking it live in New Zealand, and they called me out to the studio to help with the commentary. And of course, it was a fabulous day in New Zealand because it happened to come on a public holiday. It was Sunday, of course, in America, which meant it was Monday in New Zealand. That was Labor Day. Everybody was on holiday that day. Everybody got up, brushed their teeth, made a cup of tea, and turned on the television. And there was Alison Rowe winning the New York Marathon. It was just a sort of fabulous coincidence. And that's one of the ways in which I think running has made history outside just itself, more significant history. So that would be a big milestone. The other one I've got at the back of the book, When Running Made History, I have timelines, which most people haven't noticed, and they don't know how much work went into those. My description is 1981 was the year of miracles, when everything happened. I had a whole list of things, and one of them you mentioned was the move to professionalism. It wasn't only at Cascade, it was happening at world level as well, and that's a more complicated story, which I've told elsewhere. What was significant about the Cascade was the close involvement of Nike. And therefore, not just professionalism, but really a power bid, a power coup for power to take over the sport from the federations and pass it to the corporations.
Yeah, the commercialization, right?
Yeah. So that was what was really important about Cascade. And then that year also, Ethiopia and Kenya had teams in the world cross country. And that year in 1981, the decision was made after all Catherine's pressure to include the women's marathon in the 1984 Olympics. So 1981, the whole list of things. That was like the year of the sport turning from the old days that you and I remember, when it was essentially amateur and we were slightly eccentric and slightly weird and runners and skinny little people who were no good at football. And that's when it turned into this mass movement.
Yeah. I was running in the 70s and running on the roads by myself. Cars would throw a beer can or open their car door or yell, "Hut 1, Hut 2, thanks for your service." It was just, it was almost an alien thing
Yes.
to the public
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right.
before that. Yeah.
What they said in England for years was 2, 3, 4, come on, Roger Bannister. And the little boys they were still saying that when they couldn't have been born when Roger Bannister broke the 4. It was fascinating how long that lasted.
That's brilliant. Yes. And the female New Zealand runners were such a giant part of the early 80s, although on the world stage, Tremaine O'Dane and Lorraine Moeller and Allison, they were just tearing everything up. So it was a giant Kiwi contribution. I can understand Five front page, and many more,
And that was partly that they'd been a major part of the sport. Running was very active for women in New Zealand before the marathon. What they all did was just make the transition when the marathon became available. They'd run 800s in the Commonwealth Games in 1974. Not Alison, she wasn't quite old enough to, but she came through a bit before. But Lorraine and Anne both ran in 1974.
Yeah, 1,500, 3,000 meters were the top distances.
Long, yeah. I think Lorraine ran 800 in Christchurch and then went on and became a marathon runner. So they were just part of the sport. And the same was true in England with runners like Dale Gregg, going back into the 1960s, and in New Zealand, Millie Sampson in the 1950s. There weren't distance races for them, not on the track, but they would have a road championship over 3 to 4K and a cross-country championship over 3 to 4K. People forget those things because the history of women's sport has become dominated by the marathon. And the story has been one of fighting against exclusion. There wasn't exactly exclusion on the track. There weren't the longer races, but nor was there much demand for it to begin with. So,
what do you think about that change and the domination of the marathon for young runners? Now, the decision to pursue track or just, I've got to become a marathoner. and people that haven't even grown up running yet.
Historically, and this is part of your interest in the 70s, historically, there were two really key things about America. When I first came to America in 1980, I saw these, and then again in 83. And when I started to run races like Cascade Runoff and Peachtree, and little races as well, little races in Fountains Valley, California, where I couldn't even find it. And of course, I've always liked grassroots stuff as well as the big stuff. There's two really huge things that America contributed. One was, and you'll laugh at this, but it's really important. It was America that invented the concept of a road race as a party. See, for
Yes.
us, road racing had been rather, crowding and serious and young,
A quiet event.
quiet, private, eccentric little geeky blokes, and just everything very basic. And we just didn't expect it any other way. And then America came along, and suddenly there were these tables loaded with bananas and melons and and music and bands and all of these things. And you got this sense of celebration. And America, that was really important. And people don't realize how lacking it was in the sport before. And the other thing was that I think this is Frank Shorter's contribution. Frank Shorter didn't create the running boom that was going on anyway. What he did was he put the marathon up front in the American mind. And he also showed, and he showed this absolutely, literally showed it, that you could win a great marathon and still look good. Whereas mostly the image of the marathon was some little skinny guy with rubber legs staggering about and falling across the finish line, to put it simply. And Abebe Bikila, of course, had been different, but he was Ethiopian. Whereas Frank was an American and looked at and ran. He looked like poetry when he ran. And so it made it beautiful and appealing to the American public. And I found when I came to America that there'd been this fundamental change in running language. When you met a runner in England or New Zealand, the first question was, what's your best placing in the national cross country? That's what if I was meeting you for the first time, that's how I would identify you, how good you are, how serious you are, blah, blah. In America, it was, what's your fastest marathon?
Yeah.
And when I first went to America in 1980, I hadn't run one. I'd never run a marathon. I'd been running for 30 years. I'd never run a marathon because it was this kind of eccentric thing up the top. And I was essentially a cross country and road and track runner. 10 miles was enough for me. It hadn't occurred to me to run a marathon. And I felt almost as if I'd forgotten to put my pants on when I got to America.
That's great. Yeah.
I didn't have a marathon time.
Yeah. Yeah. People who discovered Frank Shorter in 1972 probably don't know that he was a 3-mile champion. He would run 2-mile races. All that stuff was, that he was discovered by the public.
Yes,
Right.
that's right. And so I had to quickly set to and run a marathon in 1980. So hold a conversation.
What training did you do? How did you figure out what you would need to do to prepare? In 1990, Fred Lebow came over to Cairo as a consultant, and they were going to revive a marathon in Cairo. I was living in Egypt, and I had arrived, and I said, I'm not in shape, but I'm fit, and I used to be a runner. And I jumped in and ran the marathon, and it was a disaster in terms of the water stops left. It was an out and back between the Giza pyramids and Saqqara, and after we ran by, they went home. So there was no water on the way back. It was a crazy race. And I remember the debriefing. It was just a handful of people in it. Fred Lebow came with 4 runners, not elite runners, just people that were going to make an exotic marathon run. And he said, don't do this again here. But it survived. It has survived. Yeah.
Has it?
So what did you do to prepare?
That's a memorable one for you to have done.
Yeah, it was great. And a couple of years later, Ron Hill was touring on his, I'll just show up and get a free trip wherever. And he traveled with his wife, and he came to Cairo and he ran the half, and I ran that. maybe 92, 93. And he was just doing the celebrity tour.
Ah, uh-huh.
So it was a great,
He was
I was just living, I had a
oh,
great
yeah,
place to
but
live.
by 92, 93, Ron, he was collecting nations, wasn't he? Because we arranged for him quite late in his life to run a race in, I think it was Uruguay, because
Ah,
Catherine had some contact and he'd never done Uruguay and he wanted his 181st country or something like this.
yeah,
He was a great collector.
yeah. He actually went to the Hash House Harrier run that afternoon in the back hatch of my station wagon.
Ah, is that right? No,
He was crazy.
I,
He just, yeah, he ran a half marathon, said, "Ah, let's go to the hash." He wanted his wife that she got the front seat and there were a bunch of other people in the back. And yeah, it was just a pleasure to have him
no,
show
he's a
up.
good guy. He was captain of the England cross country team the year I ran. So,
Wow.
and we were students. He was at Manchester University, but we were the same age pretty
Yeah.
well. And I think he
I-
was, I'm trying to remember in the British University's cross country, I think he was, the year he won, I was about seventh, I think. Yeah. So I knew him somewhat.
Yeah. I think his running streak was still on at 46 years or something when I met
Oh, it
him.
was incredible. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
not something that's ever interested me very much, running like every day. But you were asking how one problem with a marathon, and maybe the Kenyans have disproved this, is that you can't really train for it because it's so far. I've always had the basic principle of training is what I call quantity of quality. And that means if you're going to race, let's say 10K, and your race time is going to be, say, 35 minutes. In training, you needed to have built up so that you've done 35 minutes worth of quality running. And you might do that as you might start by running 3 by 5 minutes and then 4 by 5 minutes, and you build up to 7 by 5 minutes, just 35 minutes. So then you're ready. It's a very simple, rough guide. But you can't do that for the marathon. Because you can't go out and do that amount. And the Kenyans now are doing tempo training and finding various ways of training for that length of time at that level. I'd always done long intervals. I'd always done, say, 6 by 1 mile, 8 by 1 mile, or I've always preferred to do it in time. I might do, I think when I was preparing for a marathon, I did 4 by 15 minutes at race pace, trying to get up there, trying to get the quantity of quality up there. Then before my first one, I added some more longer runs than I was in the habit of doing, 2 hours plus. I've never been a big mileage man. I've had too much else in my life to do that. Probably I'd have run better if I could have increased the mileage somewhat, but no point in regretting it. But I tried to build it up for the marathon. And of course, just believe if the marathon's going to take you 2.5 hours, you need to run for 2.5 hours.
And you ran up a lot of marathons now, right?
I didn't run that many because I didn't start until I was 41. Start running marathon because as I said, I hadn't run one before that, New York in 1980. And then I got injured. Then my last one was 96 and I was injured there, but with the knee, and then the knee gave out. And so that was it. And I only ran about a dozen marathons.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Well,
no,
what was your feel for the marathon or your prep at that point? Once you crossed over and you had great success in the marathon, how was it as a race for you? All else being equal, if you said, okay, I want to have a couple good races next year, was that becoming some distance that you preferred, liked, or how did it fit in?
Yeah, I liked it. I didn't like the amount of time in preparation that it takes. I've never been a full-time runner. I've never been a professional runner, and I've wanted other things in my life. The problem now at this age, say, to run a marathon, if I ran well, would be 5 hours, 4 to 5 hours. I don't want to go out and do 5 hours training. I'm sorry, I just don't. I'm married to somebody who does that. Catherine is well capable. She would have been a fabulous ultra runner if ultra running had existed for women in the 1960s and 70s, because she can just go and run up and keep.
Yeah, I
I,
think I
I, I
heard
can't.
of her running 30 miles in training.
Yeah. Oh, she does. I don't want to do that. But the positive thing of the marathon for me is that I love the long-term kind of dramatic narrative of it. That it fits somehow with the fact that academically, I'm a specialist in novelists like Dickens and Thackeray, whose books are 800 or 900 pages long. And I like that. I like the sense of the slowly evolving plot. And I love being in the group, in the competitive group in the marathon. The drama is happening and you're part of it, but you don't know what's going to happen. And I always enjoyed that sense of shaping it and trying to get it right. And a key thing is not to go out too fast, get your pacing, and then use the conditions. So that aspect of it, I did enjoy. But you can get that in most races as well, that sense of the developing plot. You've got four guys together. No, one of them is going to win, one of them is going to drop off the back, and you don't know which is which until it happens. And then sometimes you try and make it happen. You'll be the one who takes the initiative.
I'll mention, I'll certainly list this, roger-robinson.com. People can read a little bit of the summary of your career, find out about getting your books. Have you read other running books, watched running movies? Have any of them got it as far as you are concerned?
Oh, yes. I wrote I wrote the book. I won't say just a book because it is still the book called Running in Literature. It's the only book that's ever been written about running as a literary subject. And I start with the ancient Greeks, with Homer, and then the Bible, and then right through to modern running books. It was 2003, I think, so it's getting a bit out of date now. But for the running novels, I did that as a race and picked the finalists 1 to 12. I think the greatest running book ever has been written since then, which is Kenny Moore's book called Bowerman and the Men of Oregon, which is just by any standards a fabulous piece of writing. Kenny was a just really superb, versatile, elegant, interesting writer. Just every sentence holds up. Every sentence it just sings and does its job, which is how I try and write myself. And Kenny is the one writer in running who I would, it's like you're lining up for a race and you think this is like lining up next to Eliud Kipchoge. And I can be a good second, but he's really goes. That's the book that I would always recommend. It's as good as, or maybe better as a book than The Boys in the Boat, which is another really fabulously good sports book.
The historical period of that and just the time of growing up of those characters in The Boys in the Boat is just a great period of America.
Yes, and in a different period, that's what Kenny gets in his book with the appearance of Nike, for instance, and Bill Bowerman in the Special Forces in World War II, and then the whole post-war period, and then the emergence of Nike and the whole movement into the modern world and the kind of thing that we were talking about, and everything exploding from this funny little minority sport into a mass social movement. And that's a good record. And no, I'm a literary critic. That's my job. So that's a good book to have done. And I think my judgment's so good. And they've had the things like great running poems, Kipling, and If You Can Feel the Unforgiving Minute, and We Run Because We Like It, C.H. Sawley, We Run Because We Like It Through the Broad Bright Land, and Houseman's One for the Runner Who Died Young. And it ends with runners whom renown outran and the name died before. Now you will not join the rout of those who wore their honors out. Runners whom renown outran and the name died before the man. Wonderful poem. Gay poem, in fact, but that's not immediately apparent or the only thing. So that's a book I'm very proud of. And then I would say, this is going to sound a bit boastful, but I would put my books, especially When Running Made History and the latest one, Running Throughout Time, I would put those pretty close up behind Kenny's because they do bring a literary perspective, a literary dimension to writing about running. The narrative is as good as you're going to find in any short story or novel. And the research is also thorough and accurate. What I say for that last book is what I try and do is tell the stories well and get them right. Those two things. That's the one book. If you really want to find out exactly what did Pheidippides do, or exactly why is the marathon 26 miles, 385 yards, 26.19 meters. Why? Exactly why? And should it? Yeah, you'll laugh at this. I mean, something people haven't noticed. The key piece of documentation was from the clerk of the course at the London Marathon in 1908, who gave the measurement, and he said the distance around the track to finish at the regular finish line, which was also by under the royal box, is 385 yards. And he said the distance from Windsor Castle to the stadium is about 26 miles. Now, I say in the book, how did that word about
Get dropped off. Yeah.
turn into exactly why are Dave Katz and Jim Gerwick and all these other course measurers obsessed with getting it exactly right when it all comes from somebody saying about 26 miles? It's really very funny the way it's evolved, but I tell the actual story and include measurements from somebody who's in the southern counties of England Athletic Association, who's actually located from photographs and trig readings exactly where the race started in the grounds of Windsor Castle and so on. So I've really done the work in that book and got these things right. If you want to know how many women fell down and collapsed in the notorious 1928 800 meters, read my book and you'll find out.
You've done the work, and I'm embarrassed to say, as an interviewer, I haven't read your books. I've got a stack, and I'm reading as feverishly fast as I can. The book I just finished was Brad Fowley's The Front Runner, which I think you
Oh,
were
yeah.
you were the first person who got their hands on it to read it as a reviewer. I apologize. I will read all of your books now. I'm going to talk to Brad in the next week. What did you think of his book?
I of course liked it. He writes with a great verve, and it's a running novel, and it's in that way ambitious, but it's a big gap in the market. We don't have many decent running novels, and Brad did some really interesting things to fill that. And it's not just the usual, evil coach bullies innocent runner who has a triumphant last chapter. There's elements of that. There's elements of fantasy, but he handles it with great gusto. So I like.
It is a hero's journey.
Yes, it
book I
is.
think he was
Yes.
striving for, and he got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed
It-
it too.
No, I like that. And the best novel I think was by an English writer called Tom McNabb, whose best known running book is Flanagan's Run. But he did another one called The Fast Men, which I thought was terrific. And that was about runners in the 19th century in the Wild West. It's a crossover between a kind of Wild West movie with cowboys and Indians type thing, but mixed with professional runners. And because Tom McNabb's married to an actress, it's also mixed with early theatre of that period. So it's a fascinating mix. He draws on all those things very well. And that's really a great read. It's a pity that people don't know that book better.
I think after getting to your books, I think I will maybe we'll have a bit of a correspondence around your busy schedule, and I will put a reading list on this podcast website for the runners. A lot of the books, of course, from a European and South Pacific experience that you have access to and your many decades of experience, I think your recommendations would be very welcome to the audience. Yeah, that's great.
In many ways, what one of my great strengths as a writer in all fields is my internationalism. No, I've lived in 3 countries. I know those cultures. I know and like them well. And my reading has been international in that way. And my running experience has been international. Most people inevitably, it's just because of their way of life. I've been, if you like, lucky just with the way I've moved around. Or it just hasn't just been, it's been chance. I had no intention of ever spending that amount of time in America, but then I fell in love with an American and everything else followed from that.
We've been talking, you've been mentioning your wife. Let's just fill people in a little bit about that. Where did you meet and what is her? I'm not going to say she has a single claim to fame. She's one of the key figures in women empowerment through running. It's a fantastic story. And it's very hard to get a hold of her to have time to have a chat with her to talk about this. So maybe give us a 2-minute. How did you meet Kathrine Switzer?
Catherine, she's infamous for the 1967 Boston Marathon when she entered, got a bib number 261. But at that time, according to the race organizers, women were not supposed to run, though there was no rule that said that. And she was attacked by the race director, and this is all caught on camera. But I always say with Catherine, she shouldn't be defined by that, because to define her by that is to, as it were, again, conventionalize and stereotype her as the woman to whom things happen and who gets attacked and gets rescued, which was the job of women culturally. They had to get themselves into danger and then be rescued. What's important about her is what she then went on to do and the way she used that episode to really advocate for women to have access to long distance running, and especially the marathon. She did that extremely skillfully because she's very good on camera and very diplomatic. She was definitely the key figure on getting the women's marathon into the Olympics. She didn't do it by taking a law case against the International Association, which was counterproductive. She did it by working with the organizations, working within them, getting to know them, winning their trust, producing medical reports which were convincing, and all of that, really doing the hard work and working within the system, and got that marathon ahead of the track. That was in 1984. I just met her then. We met in 1983 when I was invited from New Zealand. I was a top masters runner at that time, over 40. And I was invited to the Canberra Marathon in Australia, where the men's race was sponsored by Nike, who were giving me some equipment. I wasn't being paid money by them, but they would pay travel expenses and give me shoes sometimes at that point. And the women's race was part of the Avon women's circuit, which Catherine had created and organized. Hugely successful and important series of races in women's running globally. We were the two guest speakers 2 nights before the race. And that's as far as the censors will allow me to tell you this full story.
That's fantastic.
We met then, and Canberra, I should say, is the federal capital of Australia. Australia is a bit like America, and it has a state system, but the federal capital is in Canberra, as they call it, and it's full of public servants. And we can always get a big laugh in Australia by saying that we're the only people in the world who think of Canberra as romantic.
Right.
The Australians always fall over laughing at that, because Canberra to them is the epitome of dullness and public service conventional. So we met then, and I was running well enough to be able to persuade Nike to send me to the Cascade Runoff and Peachtree during a university break in the middle of that year. Catherine and I happened to meet again at that point, and so on. So that was the beginnings of it.
Another great location, a iconic kind of location, Canberra. Is that a flat course?
The course was pretty flat. Yes. There were 1 or 2 hills and bridges and things, but mostly pretty.
Yeah. I think what I'd like to do is go ahead and ask you to work with your son and see if we're going to have a camera option.
Yes. We'll do.
And I think the whole podcast I've ever done, I think we could just do with you to talk through the history. I appreciate all the time you've given me, and I'll take all the other time that you have when we reconnect. But it would be great to get you on camera.
Okay, that's fine. We've covered a lot today, but that'll be good.
We did, yeah.
And I need to get this camera thing sorted anyway. But if my
Yeah.
son can't do it, then I'll need to go really right up to the top and go to my grandson.
That's great.
Okay.
And at some point when I publish this, maybe it will encourage Catherine to fit me in sometime in the future too. I'd love to hear. It is harder to get a hold of.
Yeah, it's all
But,
important. Oh, Catherine will
yeah.
do it for you. I'll find a time. She's currently away hiking the Heaphy track.
Nice.
She's totally out of any
Out
kind
of-
of heat, Wi-Fi contact of any sort.
Yeah, that's great. I
Uh,
talked
well-
with her team a couple months ago, and they said, okay, we can, Laura Beachley.
Oh, with Laura, yes, with Beachy. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I'll tell Catherine about you. She may not give you 2 hours, but
Oh, that's, yes.
she does
yeah.
a lot of these and doesn't, as it were, have a book to promote. But if she gets a chance to promote the 261 nonprofit, then she'll do it for you, Matthew. And I'll talk to her
That's
when she gets.
perfect.
The way I see this is back in the days of Jane Austen and people, when ladies of mature years wanted to get together, they did embroidery. But they
Ah.
hike, now they go on 4-day hikes on the Heathy Trail.
Thank
I'll
you
go-
very much for your time
Right.
today, Roger. We'll talk
Go.
soon.
I'll go for my run. Okay, Matthew, all the best.
All right. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed another episode of Running in the 70s. Voices, stories, and memories of athletes who were running in the 70s. Until next time, wherever you are, keep looking forward and don't forget to look back.